Alright, welcome everyone to another episode of America's Got Issues. In today's episode, we have some questions and experiences from some of our listeners that tackle race. We're going to answer the questions and explain other concepts, so let's get into it. So, our first one is by our listener, Anthony, and his question is, based on recent events like Black Lives Matter, how would you go about educating an individual who holds racial biases towards black people and opposes the movement? That's a great question. Well, to first start off with educating a person on this amazing movement, we must educate them on the past. The Black Lives Matter movement is one of many racial movements that relate to the life and treatment of black Americans. Starting as soon as the late 1700s with the Underground Railroads to the March on Selma around 1965. These human beings have been fighting for equal rights for over 300 years. The Black Lives Matter movement is proof that even after years of fighting, our government is still ignorant towards how race divides the country. The Black Lives Matter is filled with the new open-minded people who are ready to fight once more for our rights. As written in our Constitution, we Americans have the right to stand for our beliefs and try to change our system. Thanks, Anthony. Our next question comes from our listener, Dana. Her question is, why are Latinas always described as fiery and crazy just because we're Latin? And most of us are this way because our ancestors taught us to be independent, to stand tall. That makes sense. Well, in the whole world, people have seen females as lower than the males. Since even the dinosaur ages, our bodies have evolved to be different. With this, some men still have caveman mentalities and try to make sure that females are just quote-unquote gatherers. However, when it comes to Hispanic females, men have put stereotypes on them and call them terms such as exotic. Hispanic females have been known to fight against what they believe is wrong, whether they act like Dolores Huerta or strong like Jennifer Lopez. Jennifer Lopez, my bad. With this being said, we have men who try to still put down others with terms just because they feel fear towards a woman who can't think for herself. So I say you keep being fiery and strong and make them fear your powers as a female. Dana also says, why do Americans assume that we don't speak English or that we don't have papers? Like they speak to us as if we're dumb. I understand that, so let's take a look at our history. When we look, we can see our brave ancestors that have trudged over hardships and made a living in our country. However, people in America treat us all as if we cannot speak English for simple things like our cultural last names or our dark pigmentation. To simply put it, these people are ignorant and need to be educated better. According to Pew Research, there are about 33.2 million Hispanics in America that can speak English proficiently. That's more than half of all Hispanics in this country. Dana also says, why does every Latino/Hispanic person are assumed to be Mexican? And yeah, sad as it seems, we all get assumed to be Mexican, even though our various countries that make up Hispanics and Latino people are numerous. I myself have been, stereotyped to be Mexican, even though I'm partially from Mexico and partially from Nicaragua. They assume this because they believe that any brown-skinned person is Mexican. Even though this brown skin can come from many different countries other than Latin countries, another reason why they assume everyone is Mexican is simply just because it's easier to say than try to figure out that not every Hispanic person looks the same. Even the US government had issues with categorizing us. So it's just a simple matter of people are taking an easy way out. Alright, thanks Dana. Our next comes from Anne. Anne says, I was writing a note to my tia, and because Spanish is my first language, I was struggling with spelling some words, and I had asked my mom, who is fluent in Spanish, for help. My uncle happened to be sitting at the table with us, and he said to speak English since we are in America. It is ironic since he was brought here when he was a child and had to learn to speak English and Spanish was his first language. Alright, so, to start this off, there's always going to be ignorant people in this country. And that won't change. Your uncle may be one of those people in America that get angry at the fact that we're so diverse. They don't realize that there's 60 million Hispanic people and almost 21 million Asian people in our country. They don't get the fact that there are about 350 unique languages in America that are not English. Thanks for your experience, Anne. Let's move on to Aaliyah. So Aaliyah says, in 8th grade during my PE class, I was putting on chapstick because my lips were crusty, duh. And my PE teacher commented, "It looks like you ate some fried chicken." And I was so shocked. He later said something along the lines of black people love fried chicken. He said it in front of the whole class and everyone was laughing and I just felt so embarrassed. I think I cried and felt really down about myself and mad at the fact that I didn't slap the out of him. I guess it was a more of a stereotype he said and not really being racist. I don't know, but that's one I always remember. Let me start off by saying this. That PE teacher makes me sick. To be able to treat a child with straight up racism at a young age isn't right. That one person is one of many people who blurt out statements that are racist without even knowing that they're racist. This is something that a lot of people didn't know, but during the times of segregation, people have used films to portray certain people badly. For example, there's been many films where they create an image of black people as dirty, aggressive, and uneducated, which is not always true. The stereotype of fried chicken actually came from this film called Birth of a Nation, and it was written by one of the main founders of the KKK. You can see why it's going to be racist. This film had showed a section in the film where it was a group of black men in a courthouse yelling aggressively and eating fried chicken. This was to stereotype the whole thing of black people shouldn't be allowed to vote, and they use fried chicken because the way that you're supposed to eat it. You eat fried chicken with your hands, you get dirty in it. So they used that to describe black people at the time, saying that they were dirty and they would eat with their hands. And it's just a moronic ideal of some people. But thank you, Aaliyah, for sharing. Our next comes from Jackie, and she says, one time I experienced racism was in 3rd grade. I was sitting in line for lunch, and the girl next to me was saying something in Spanish. I told her I understood what she was saying, but she told me I couldn't understand Spanish because I have dark skin. I remember looking at the palms of my hands and comparing them to her skin because I didn't understand why my skin color made me less entitled to speak a language. Let me start off by saying I hate how so many young people have to tell themselves that the color of their skin means something different if you're dark or light. Skin pigmentation is just natural for any human. Yet so many people use this to classify someone as if they were good or bad. I know you personally, Jackie, and I know your Spanish is way better than mine will ever be. People assume that some races have to stay within their predetermined space. For example, people assume Chinese people have to speak Chinese. But there's some Chinese people who grew up in Spanish countries and learned fully Spanish and not even a little bit of Chinese. I also want to point out the fact that we have seen this in various cases in science. They have done research about this. That children don't see race. That they're learned and they're taught how to be within their own race. So, thanks for your submission. Our next one comes from Yasmin. And Yasmin says, so Andrew, here's my question. As a Latinx male with indigenous features, what are some racist remarks you have experienced from the Latinx community? How did that make you feel? I'm assuming she didn't really mean to say Latinx community, but more just the community in general. Thankfully, I have not had a lot of experiences of racism. I live in a neighborhood full of homeless people, and they're all mostly colored people. And I truthfully feel more accepted in this neighborhood than I do a few blocks down. Because I live in Little Tokyo, in the middle of downtown, and it feels like there's two different worlds separated by the street I live on. For example, if you know downtown, you know there's a street called 3rd Street. So anything above 3rd Street is bustling, bright, busy world, major businesses, city hall, high middle class people. But from 3rd Street down is known as Skid Row, which is the epicenter of homelessness in LA. Sick people on the street alongside with drugged people and crime. But still, I feel as if I'm rejected by the rich rather than the poor. Thanks, Yasmin, for your submission. Our next one comes from Giselle, and her question is, why is the Black Lives Matter movement getting so much attention now compared to back then? Or why does it matter more than it did back then? Well, I get where you're coming from, but let me clarify some things for you. The Black Lives Matter movement got a lot of coverage than any other black movement that has happened in the past, and the reason for this is that it's just we're more open-minded, tech-savvy, and media-oriented. Back in the days, the only way that you would get coverage is if you were lucky, or if you had acted big enough, or if you had a black-owned newspaper business that was able to spread the news. Today, however, we have various big-time celebrities supporting and spreading the news all around. We have social media that spreads events like wildfire. And our new generation has the ability of the internet to move ideas over the world. And this movement doesn't necessarily mean more, but has had more of an ability to move and spread to different people. Thanks, Giselle, for your question. Our final submission is by Destiny, and she says, so like when my parents and I have gone to Costco, the lady at the entrance asked us for the membership cards when she didn't ask others before. So like, what are you implying? So what does that mean? Was she doing her job or did she target us? It happened twice. And the other statement she says was, my brother used to work at a Porto's in Glendale, and one night as a busser, he was closing and some guy and his friends wanted to go in, but it was closing time. And my brother and his coworker said that they couldn't go in, obviously, but the guys told my brother racial slurs, and my brother was literally about to fight them, but the workers were walking away, basically taunting him. So, like I said earlier in the podcast, people stereotype Hispanic people for many different things. One of those, which relates to the situation, is that all Hispanic people are poor. This comes from the first time that Hispanic people ever came to America. They were workers trying to get a better life, and they had been working for a fraction of what the other people did. Hispanic people, along with a lot of other races, are super hardworking people. However, some stereotypes come from something like this, that they act, that we work with whatever job we have and turn it into us stealing their jobs, and that we are only low-ranked job workers. But with this story of your brother, those people treat us as if we are lower than them no matter what happens. I'm glad though that your brother was not scared and stood up to them. We need more people like that. Thanks, Destiny. And so, that wraps up today's podcast. That took us about 12 minutes. We tackled the Black Lives Matter movement, racist experiences from my fans, and I added some reasoning to clear your minds. I'm so grateful to all the people who submitted a response. Thank you so much. And until the next episode of America's Got Issues, I'll see you then. Bye, everyone.